And right now, baby boomers are buying more homes than millennials. The National Association of Realtors says people ages 58 to 76 years old made up nearly 40% of home buyers last year.
Mooching millennials getting their parents to pay their bills, according to Fortune. Adults in their 20s to 30s are turning to mom and dad for financial assistance as adulting becomes too hard.
A new survey from Natixis Investment Managers shows that only 46% of Americans born between 1981 and 1996 are factoring Social Security into their retirement planning.
That's compared to 90% of baby boomers or people born between 1946 and 1964.
Millennials have always been labeled the unluckiest generation, lazy, not as hardworking as our parents, unable to meet the bar set by the high standards of our society. But what if I told you that that's not all necessarily true? Notice necessarily, because in life there are always two sides to a story. And the one fact in this story is millennials need to wake up! And no time is better than now. Too many in this generation are struggling paycheck to paycheck. And when I say too many, I mean 73% of millennials.
That's insane.
Yes, that is insane. That means 73% of us don't have money for an emergency. I'm making it my next paycheck. And that is the type of attitude that has sunk this generation further. At any given time, any ordinary person could run into a situation where they need that money. Car repairs, medical expenses, and home maintenance and renovations. If you're one of the lucky ones that owns a house, that is, which I'm proud to say is over half of you millennials as of recently.
Also shows 18 million households are now headed up by millennials. That's opposed to 17 million households recorded as renting, so that's a 52% ownership ratio.
Let's put aside some of the statistics for a minute and look at the bigger picture. First, let's talk about the future problem that millennials face right now. We are facing a massive Social Security deficit for this generation. Let's break down how Social Security works and why it's going to be a problem for most of us in the future. You see, Social Security is primarily funded through a payroll tax, a tax that is all too familiar for all of us working Americans. This payroll tax that we pay into is then used to provide benefits to those who are retired or disabled. This tax generally covers all expenses for Social Security in general. Sounds good, right? But herein lies the problem. Simply put, people are living longer. Can't argue with that. So Social Security has to cover more retirees, while the ratio of workers to retirees decreases over time, which means that more money is being pulled out than is being put in. This could be a major problem. You see, besides the payroll tax deduction, Social Security is further backed up by two trust funds. You know, sort of like a fail-safe. One is the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund, which pays retirement and survivor benefits, and the other is the Disability Insurance Trust Fund, which pays disability benefits. Now we're already set to dip into both of these trust funds before the end of the year. Remember, this is supposed to be a fail-safe, meaning we're not supposed to use it unless something fails.
Oh, it's too late.
And failed we have. This is our President Franklin D. Roosevelt signing the Social Security Act in 1935.
This Social Security measure gives at least some protection to 50 millions of our citizens who will reap direct benefits through unemployment compensation, through old age pension, and through increased services for the protection of children and the prevention of ill health.
Now, at that time, it was an excellent idea to put the Social Security Act forward for a lot of Americans. It kept older Americans out of poverty, and those who were unemployed were now getting checks. A great act at that time, seeing as we were coming out the 1929 Great Depression, a time of terrible loss for many Americans. But what happens when you don't change something over time? Eventually, a good thing becomes a bad thing. No! And that's exactly what's happened to us millennials. Now, whether or not you believe that Social Security will be a problem for you in the future is up to you. Nobody's going to care about your future more than you yourself. Wake up! And with that being said, we have to take an even deeper look into the problems that are facing a lot of us millennials, like home ownership. Now, I know I said earlier in the video that over half of millennials own their homes. What I didn't say is how many of us actually regret that purchase, but not for the reasons you may think. You see, owning an asset like a home is definitely a step in the right direction. But as you know,
with great power comes great responsibility.
let me explain how this situation has become a double-edged sword for many of us. While home ownership is the American dream, it can also be an American nightmare. Because while you're paying off your 30-year or 15-year fixed mortgage, a lot of opportunities will pass you by. Remember, a mortgage is the single most expensive thing most people will buy in their lives. But isn't it ironic that that expensive mortgage is wrapped up in something I like to call a closed-in loan, meaning that money can flow in freely, but it can't come out freely. And guess who holds the key to all that closed-in money, which we call equity? The banks. And the only way to get a hold of that money is to do something I'd like to call refinancing, which requires you to do what?
I don't know.
Take out another loan. And thus begins the cycle of you spending more time inside of that loan. Well, that new loan, because that's essentially what refinancing is. Here are some articles from a couple of years ago when millennials dominated the headlines for refinancing their homes more than any other age group. And I must say, a lot of them probably did it for the right reasons of the low interest rates during the pandemic. A smart move if you're financially literate and vigilant of your unique housing situation. So pulling out that cash equity in our homes and using it responsibly is something we all did, right?
Hell no!
You see, the ultimate goal of owning a home in America was always to bridge the gap between the poor and the rich, with that home being the wealth building tool you'll need to reach that American dream. But how many of us millennials have really reached that American dream through owning our home?
The growing gap between rich and poor Americans is one of the biggest challenges facing the country. Get this, the richest 1% controls more wealth now than at any time in more than a half century.
And if our homes are excellent wealth building tools to our dreams, then how is it possible that the gap between the rich and poor has grown so exponentially? These are the questions I ask myself, and now I'll ask you as the viewer, what's your opinion on it? And we're going to continue to talk about deep subjects. Until next time, be safe.